Today's shiur begins 4 lines from the top of Daf Mem Tes Omid Beis. 4 lines from the top at the Mishnah. The topic heading that you see on the side of the Gemara, the Nosei, it reads as follows: Rishimas HaPratim, a list of details or of examples, shel tumas meis shesoisrim nazirus, defilement to the dead that have the power of erasing, of voiding all days that a Nazir had counted up till that point. Take note of the fact that in general, Nazirus is affected, is cancelled by defilement, specifically to the dead. We call that tumas meis. However, you'll note that there are situations where a person can become tomei meis, and yet it won't erase the days of Nazirus that he had counted till that point of defilement. We use the term, it won't soser those days. So that even though we generally associate stira, the undoing of the counting of a Nazir, with tumas meis, they're not one and the same. As we go on in the Mishnah, maybe we'll point out from time to time that factor. The Mishnah: Al elu tumos hanazir megaleach. On the following tumos, the Nazir will stop his Nazirus, wait 7 days, take a haircut. Megaleach specifically is the haircut at the end of the defilement period, and then restart his Nazirus. Al hameis, al kzayis min hameis. If one defiles himself to a body, a corpse, or an olive quantity of corpse flesh. This opening of the Mishnah is something that the Gemara is going to focus on, and we'll say it's kind of strange that if for a mere olive quantity of corpse flesh, a Nazir has to stop and megaleach, so obviously for a complete corpse, why then is point 1 taught when I could have easily figured that out just by stating point 2? We continue. V'al kezayas netzel, an olive quantity of netzel. Netzel, this is explained in the Tosfos in the middle of the wide lines. Moyel min hameis, kinemeforish begemara. Moyel is a type of, let's say, exusion or slime, coagulation that is emitted from a decomposing body. Number 4, V'al maloi tarvid rekev. The expression malo tarvid, tarvid is a type of spoon. We'll say just it's a known quantity to the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, so they use it just as a matter of fact. Malo means a full spoonful of rekev. Rekev is the decomposition, the dry or the dirt that results from a decomposing body. That's the shiur, that's the quantity, a malo tarvid of this earth decomposition from a body. Number 5, V'al hashedra. Al hashedra means a spine, a human spine. V'al hagulgolas, a human skull. V'al aver min hameis, v'al aver min hachai, sheyesh alav basar karoi. Aver is a limb coming from a corpse, or an amputated limb. Even if the amount of flesh that's on them is quite little, it's less than an olive quantity of flesh. And when we speak about limbs, bear in mind, we're including very small limbs like sections of a finger. That would be something that could be quite small. You also have to take into consideration limbs of a newborn. That's a human being. So a limb that has on it what the Mishnah says, basar karoi. Let's look at the Rashi, 3rd line from the top. V'al aver min hachai, v'al aver min hameis, sheyesh aleim basar karoi. Literally, basar means a fit amount of flesh. What do you mean, karoi? Dahainu, כדי שיוכל לחיות ולהבריא אף על פי שאין עליהן בוסר כזית. You'd have to imagine the limb that we're talking about, if it were attached to a living person, and it has this very small amount of flesh, but it would be able to regenerate or heal itself with that minimum quantity of flesh. So that is what we mean by boser cross. So if you have right now it's a separate limb, it's detached from the body, but it has this small quantity of flesh, enough that it could have recuperated had it been attached to a living person. That is the kind of tumah that if a Nazir comes into its proximity under the same ceiling, it will ruin his Nazirus. Number 8, V'al Chatzi Kav Atzamos. Now here's a striking illustration of the distinction we made before, that for basic tumas oihel affecting anybody, regardless of Nazirus, a quarter kav, a kav is a dry measure, a specific dry measure, a quarter kav of atzamos, of bones, would be enough. That would be enough to impart tumas meis. However, when we are speaking about tumas meis, death defilement that cancels a Nazir's counting, there it would have to be a half kav in order to have that effect of being soiser the Nazirus. Let's glance at Tosfos together in the wide lines. V'al chatzi kav atzamos umayri shebo meirov minyono o meirov binyono. The half kav, it's not just any half kav of bones, it's a half kav that comes specifically from the rov minyono, is the majority of limbs. We assume that 248 limbs, the majority of that 248 is 125. So it would be a half kav of bones that has within it 125 little bones that would account for rov minyan. Rov is the majority of minyan of the number is 248, so the majority of that is 125. O merov binyono. Binyono means the structure, the skeletal structure. What do we mean when we speak about the majority of the height of a skeletal structure? So the majority of the height is, as Tosfos goes on to say, kigon sheyesh rov atzamos shenishtabru v'chatzi. Well, let's explain, because Tosfos doesn't say it immediately. The rov binyono is two of the, let's say, two thigh bones and one bone from the between the knee and the ankle. That's called, the thigh is called the yerech, and that lower bone between the knee and the ankle is called the shok. So he has a half kav of those kind of bones. Kigon sheyesh rov atzamos shenishtabru v'chatzi kav atzamos zeh mehen. The half kav of atzamos is from them. Me'at mikol etzem ve'etzem. V'hainu meirov minyono. Tosfos explains that the bones we're describing are all broken pieces, but they come from either the half kav of bones comes from either the majority, the 125, or from the structure. V'rov binyono meforish l'kamon, and this is the point we mentioned just a moment ago. Rov binyono, rov, the majority of the structure, is explained later, is shnei shokayim v'yerech echad o ipcha, two of those shok bones and one yerech, one thigh bone, o ipcha, or the other way around, two thigh bones and one shok bone, v'achopi shemitam boil b'roiv kav k'yusa behedjem asnisen. Even though there is tumas oihel, there's defilement as being a result of under the same overshadow with a mere quarter kav of bones. That's, as it says explicitly in the Mishnah Beperek Sheni de Oihelis in Maseches Oihelis, Elu mitamin boil v'kochashiv rov atzamos haba mirov minyono mirov binyono mikol mokom halachahu di'ein hanozir megaleach elo al chatzi kav. The tumas oil can be imparted with a quarter kav, but the Nazir loss is only if there's a half a kav. Let's go back now to our Mishnah. V'al, number 9, V'al chatzi lug dam. Chatzi lug is a liquid measure, and chatzi lug is a half lug of blood. Half lug of blood from a corpse. Once again, we have an example of a difference between soiser nazirus and standard tumas oil. Standard tumas oil is at a mere quarter lug of blood, a revius dam in ames. However, the Nazir won't lose his nazirus time unless it's a half lug. And as Tosfos says, these amounts, these distinctions are halacha l'moshe, so they're part of an oral tradition. Now, up till this point, we have 9 examples of things that are associated with mace that will soiser the nazirus v'al magon, v'al mason, v'al ahilon. Whether it's by contact, whether it's by masa, supporting them, carrying them even without physical contact, or ahilon is being under the same overshadow or overshadowing these items simultaneously. There's a 10th example, v'al etzem kisaora. An etzem is a bone, kisaora, in a barley quantity. That too will have the effect of ruining a person's nazirus, al mago v'al maso, through contact or carrying, not overshadowing. Al elu hanazir megaleach umaze b'shlishi ub'shvi v'soiseres hakoidmin. On these that we've mentioned, the Nazir will be forced to take the special Nazir Tuma haircut at the end of the 7 days of purification, and he will be receiving the sprinkling. The maze is the sprinkling of the red heifer, the por aduma ash water mixture, b'shlishi b'shvi, on the 3rd day and the 7th day of the purification week, and the soiseres hakomen, and he loses the days that he has counted till that point because of the defilement. And he doesn't restart his nazirus counting until he achieves purification and brings the requisite sacrifices that a nazir shenitmo has to bring, which we've seen quite a bit in this masechta, an osham, a guilt offering, an olah, and a chatas. That's the 3 types of sacrifices. We have a Tanaic source that you can see continues till the 3rd line from the top of Nun Omer Aleph. On the side of our Gemara, we have a Nosei topic heading, and this section of the Gemara focuses on the issue that we mentioned when we were reading the Mishnah concerning the necessity of teaching point 1 in our list. So on the side under the Nosei topic heading, we've written Im kezayis min ames metame. If a mere olive quantity of corpse flesh is a source of defilement, then what's the need of that redundancy of teaching that an entire corpse is metame? The Tanaic source that we have opens up with a brief but quite dramatic story. Tanu Rabbanan, Achar Ptirasus Rabbi Meir, after the demise of the great Tana Rebbe Meir, Amar Lehen Rabbi Yehuda l'Talmidav. Rabbi Yehuda said to his students, these Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir were contemporaries, and Rabbi Yehuda said to his own students, Al yikansu talmidei Rabbi Meir lekan. I don't want any of Rabbi Meir's students to come in here. Mitnei shekantaronim hein. They are kantaronim. I think that the word kantaronim is similar to the English expression cantankerous. Very similar in a phonetic pronunciation. They're quite similar. The Rashi uses a French word, which means essentially that they are argumentative, and not for the sake of achieving absolute truth. They don't come with their arguments. They wouldn't be coming here for the pure goal of study of Torah to achieve simple truth of what the Torah is saying. They are coming to literally to cut me down. That's kapcheni, to cut me down. Rashi says lenatzcheni, to be victorious over me in halachic arguments. So their purpose is to, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, to argue for the sake of, for argument's sake, and not for achieving a pure, truthful understanding of Torah. Well, that was Rabbi Yehuda's request. Nevertheless, Dochak Sumchus v'nichna. Sumchus, a fairly well-known Talmudic figure, a student of Rebbe Meir, he pushed his way in, and there he was, seated in the presence of Rebbe Yehuda, Omar Lahem, and he announces, he says, Kach Shona Li Rebbe Meir. Thusly, Rebbe Meir teaches, Al Elu Tumos HaNazir Megaleach, Al Hames Ve'al Kezayis Min Hames. So, he says over, Sumchus recites our Mishnah basically as it is, with point 1, the Nazir loses his Nazirus counting because of exposure to a complete corpse, and also to an olive quantity of the corpse. Now, Tosfos makes a very important point. The lower part of the Tosfos commentary, Kach Shona Li Rebbe Meir, Ba Mishnah, Al Hames, Val Kezayis Min Hames. Sumchus reported that the version of the Mishnah that Rabbi Meir taught him was exactly what we have in our printed Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda lo hoyashayna al hames Mishnah seinu mishum the kol shekenim gezayis men hames. Rabbi Yehuda was also a Tana in his version, in the Rabbi Yehuda version of Mishnayos. Point 1 was not present, wasn't there at all. As far as Rabbi Yehuda's version of the Mishnah, he would tell you al aleilu tumas hanozim megaleach al kezayis min hames. The list would begin with a olive quantity of corpse flesh, without any mention of a complete body. So there he is, Rabbi Yehuda, listening to the Rabbi Meir version, courtesy of Sumchus. Kos Rabbi Yehuda v'yamar lehem. Rabbi Yehuda became irate, and he said to the assembled, Lo kach omarti lochem, did I not say, Al yikonsu talmidei Rabbi Meir lekan mitnei shekanta ronim heim? I don't want any of the students of Rabbi Meir coming here because they are cantankerous. If for a mere olive quantity of corpse flesh the Nazir loses his Nazirus, he has to take the Nazir defilement haircut, then for a complete mace, a complete corpse, is it all the more so? Isn't it so all the more so? So once you teach for a mere kezayis min hames, the Nazir is megaleach, it's obvious that for a mace sholem, that would be the din. There's therefore no need to teach it. The Gemara continues at the top of Daf Nun Omel Aleph. Omar Rav Yossi. Rav Yossi, who was possibly present at the time, he's observing the situation and saying as follows, and lamenting and saying, Yomru, if people will say, Meir Shochav, Yudokos, Yossi Shosak, Torah Mateo Leot. Here you have Rabbi Meir passed away. Rabbi Yehuda is enraged, and I am sitting here silently. What's going to be with the Torah? That's a very unhealthy Torah environment. There's probably a lot more to say on a philosophical level about Rabbi Yossi's reaction. Nevertheless, Omar Rabbi Yossi says that remaining silent in a situation like this would be irresponsible. So I have to offer some justification for the teaching of Rabbi Meir in the face of Rabbi Yehuda's seeming legitimate objection. So Rabbi Yossi says, now we have a marking scheme. Before we continue in the Gemara, there's a double underline, one of our series markings. On the side, we have a nosei mivneh heading. The double underline represents Hesberim L'divrei Rabbi Meir, explanations for Rabbi Meir's teaching. Shomar al Ameis v'al Kezayis min Ameis, Shema Kezayis Nazir Chayav al Meis Sholem Lo Kol Shekain. So now, what does Rabbi Yossi say? Rabbi Yossi Lo Nitzrucha Elo L'Meis She'ein Olav Kezayis Basar. The Mishnah that mentions Al Hames, that's a reference to a body that, we'll say it's a very small body, and it's a complete body, but being that it's so small, it doesn't have even an olive quantity of flesh on it. So that is one source of tumah. And another source of tumah is an isolated olive quantity of corpse flesh. So if I were to teach you olive quantity of corpse flesh is metam, I wouldn't automatically know the case of a complete mace without an olive quantity of corpse flesh still on it. The Gemara, however, challenges this explanation. V'adayin yomar, but even in that case, there still is a redundancy. The Mishnah taught us that for a limb, a complete limb coming from a corpse, there is stira for the Nazir. His soiser is Nazirus. So once you know that a limb from a complete mace is soser, why is there any necessity to teach about the complete corpse, regardless of the flesh quantity issue? Let's read this in the Gemara. V'adayin yomar, but still, people could argue the problem of redundancy. Al aver mimenu megaleach al kulo lo kol shekain. If for a mere limb from a mace, the Nazir is megaleach, all the more so for a complete mace. Elo k'de'omar HaRav Yochanan. In order to explain the Mishnah and its, we'll say, seeming redundancy, we'll base ourselves on Rabbi Yochanan's teaching. Rabbi Yochanan that taught his teaching elsewhere, and we'll apply it here. Lo nitzrucha elo lenefel. Nefel is a miscarriage. Shelo niskashru evorov begidin. That is something that Rabbi Yochanan said somewhere else. HaCharami will apply that to our dilemma, our Mishnah with its seeming redundancy. Benefel shelo niskashru evorov begidin. To understand that, after we translated nefel as a miscarriage, and its limbs haven't fully developed to the point that the presence of tendons, gidin, are not there. So it's a miscarriage from a fairly, we'll say, an early stage in its development where the gidim have not yet formed. In order to appreciate this a little more, we will look at the Tosfos, and we've mentioned many times the Tosfos in this Masechta are often out of place. So the Tosfos explaining this is found at the bottom of Mem Tes Omid Beis. Elo k'd'omar Rav Yochanan. So we're reading the Tosfos together back on the bottom of Mem Tes Omid Beis. Elo k'd'omar Rav Yochanan lo yisuchel l'nefel shelo niskashru evorov begidin. And here there's a girsa change that we've written between the lines based on the Ranshborg commentary. V'ein bo kezayis basar. This nefel, this miscarriage, doesn't have an olive quantity of flesh on it. V'ever me'oisoi nefel einoi metame boil. And here's the key point for us. And a limb of this kind of miscarriage will not communicate to mas oil. Why not? Kevan she'ein bo gidin. The lo mikri ever ela etzem ubasar gidin. It doesn't have tendons in it yet. And a limb, when we speak about a limb from a corpse as being metame, it would have to have not only bone, meat, but also gidin, also tendons. The Mishnah taught the alkol hames megaleach, the idea of the giluach nazir, because of tumah for an entire body, that will apply afal pi she'ein lo adayin gidin. That applies even if there are no tendons formed. So if you have a complete miscarriage, it might very well be we're talking about something very small, and it doesn't have tendons. It nevertheless will be the basis of tumas oil, concerning which a nazir will megaleach. When you talk about a complete limb from a body as being a source of tumah, that will be a source of tumah, of defilement within our context, only if it has gidin. It has tendons as well. So there's no redundancy. We continue in the Gemara. Rava Omar lo nitzracha elo l'roiv binyanoi u'leroiv minyono she'ein bohen rova atzamos. To appreciate this, we look at the Tosfos commentary that you'll find at the top of Daf Nun here, right here. Rav Amar lo nitzroch elo l'roiv binyono l'rov minyono she'ein bohem rova atzamos v'hainu al hameis dekotoni b'masnisin. The Mishnah mentioned the complete mace, so it's not literally a complete mace, but rather it's this situation, it's this quantity, or we'll say this bone collection of rov binyan or rov minyan, even if there is lacking the rova kav quantity. The leka aver sholem, you have a situation where you don't have a complete limb. L'rabusa nokat, and there's an added chiddush here, she'ein bohen rova atzamos, you don't have even a quarter kav of bones, the shiur de Nazir hu b'chatzi kav, a standard quantity for a Nazir to lose his Nazirus counting because of bones is if you have a half kav. The afapi she'ein bo rova atzamos, in this particular scenario, even if you don't have a quarter kav of atzamos, hu megaleach, he will have to take the haircut, which represents the termination of the, let's say, the cancellation of the Nazirus up till that point. Why? Kevon sheyesh bo rov habinyan or rov haminyan, because in this very small quantity of bones, you happen to have the majority of the height or the majority of the number of bones. Aval im ein bo rov habinyan or rov haminyan, if this collection of bones does not represent the majority, namely 125, or majority of height, eino megaleach, there will be no Nazirus cancellation, ela im ken yesh bo chatzi kav. Kenamrim masnisin, de megaleach al oil rova atzamos. A Nazir does not lose his Nazirus counting for the standard quarter kav of bones. I say standard because in general there is tumas mace, but it's not enough to cause the Nazir to take the haircut, representing the defilement period. If, however, this collection of bones, coming from obviously a very small body, it, however, represents rov minyan or rov binyan, there will be no Nazirus cancellation, even if it's less than a rova of atzamos. And that's what is meant by al hames. So that's one case. And kezayis min hames is an olive quantity of flesh. Flesh is flesh, not bones. So you have two different issues. There is no redundancy. So as you can see, we had a Mishnah version, the Rabbi Meir Mishnah version al hames, al kezayis min hames. In order to explain the seeming redundancy, we had three explanations which were highlighted with our double underline marking. With that, we conclude our shiur for today.